Hi guys, again I'm Joshua Imiavan. So I'll be walking you through the residential building construction SOPs. Right, you know, there's a saying that repetition is the mother of invention. It's not just about knowing it in your head, you're getting to see it more and more and take your time to document the process. Make you an exceptional builder or a construction professional. So quick one, I'll walking you through the process involved in building a residential building. Say it a one-story building. Let's make it simple. Once you understand the basics, it's easy for you to apply to any number of floors. The same process involved. So I'm walking you through from foundation to completion the professional way. The 5 phases, the 14 steps, the site checklist and supervision logs are necessary. So why every Nigerian construction project need a formal SOPs? So thousands of Nigerians lose millions of naira annually, because there's no way for them to track their processes, and majorly this comes from structural failures and building collapse. So it's no news to us. It happens. Some people even hide their own experience. Regular violation and demolition orders. You don't follow the necessary approval before you're building, so the government can come and choose to demolish if they like. It's common in Abuja, and then Lagos, you might need to pay a whopping amount of money for you to be able to keep your building not to be demolished in millions. So no documentation for financing or insurance, contractor fraud and material substitution, because you don't know what to check, so it's easy for you to be defrauded. So poor quality defects and expensive rework, using the bad workers or no clear process on where you're going. Workers may have worked, trying to correct you spend a lot of money on the work. No clear roadmap and accountability system. So these are things that we'll be looking at today. So the National Building Code, which is NBC, mandates formal processes. Non-compliance can result in building demolition, regardless of investments made. So these are the 5 phases of the construction process. A clear professional roadmap from day 1 to handover. Pre-construction stage has 3 steps: foundation, superstructure, finishing, completion, and handover. So let's go in. For the pre-construction stage, in step 1, which is phase 1, we have our site in assessment. Say you are given a building, you are given a land to build. First thing first, or you own a land you want to build. First thing first is to do your site assessment and soil investigation. You determine your foundation type: strip, pad, raft or pile. And this is done by carrying out proper assessment, which might include carrying out soil tests. So to determine which type of foundation to be used, and also the type of building. If you are doing bungalow in a frame soil, let's say places like Ekiti, and also swampy areas, Ondo, even in Lagos, in a good part of the mainland, let's say around Shogule, Oshodi, even in Ikeja, let's say around the GRA areas, the soil they are firm. You can use a strip for a bungalow, you can use pad for a story building. But that doesn't say you shouldn't do your soil test. You know, but a soil test will give you the exact what you need, particularly if you are going for a story, right? To give you exact what you need. But if it's in the island where you have a poor soil condition, even if you are doing a bungalow, sometimes it might still even require you to do a pile for as little as a bungalow, almost with a lower load, you know, system. So also you establish the required foundation after you've carried out your assessment, and you specify your correct concrete mix ratio, and these things could be getting and recommended by your structural engineer, you know. So never allow a contractor to decide foundation type by experience alone. No, don't do that. Don't say because my neighbor use a raft, I will use a raft. My neighbor soil is not homogeneous. What you have here in 1 meter away could be very different. So this step 2, after you've done your soil assessment, you know your soil, your foundation type, yes, and yes, the next thing will be to get the structural engineer and architect to engage them for your drawings. So engage a current registered structural engineer. So include floor plans, sections, elevation, foundation plans. So the architect will help you with all this, while the structural engineer will help you with specification like your column and beam schedule, the reinforcement details that is to be done, right? So from a proper analysis and design, these are not just things that they just do. The architect comes with concepts based on your brief of what you want, while structural engineer carry out analysis to determine the realistic, you understand, of the realistic model of the design, to ensure that okay, what the architect has proposed, which is conceptual, sometimes speak like an artwork, yes, it's achievable. Yeah, so that's what they do, and they do this by calculation, applying the law of physics, force and reaction, right? And this is what they do. So also you engage an MEP during MEP engineers like your mechanical and electrical. The mechanical could include your plumbing works, you know, could include your plumbing works and other mechanical required for that your facilities, and also your electrical for all your electrical works. Get the professionals to get it done, you know. All these things are vital. So step 2 will be regular approval and building permit. Building drawings to state urban planning, submit drawings to state urban planning authority. This is very important. Why we had to do the first 2 is because they are documents necessary for the regulatory approval and the building permit. You know, you submit your drawing to state urban planning authority for all the states, mainly in Lagos, request for 4, right? 4 copies. So you pay their subscribe fee and allow site inspection. They must carry out site inspection before you can go ahead and do anything on that site. It's best because some can penalize you if you go ahead and do something before them getting to the site, like go ahead and do your digging or your foundation, will penalize as high as ₦1 million. So obtain building permits or development permits. So perform break and never break ground without an approved permit. That's what I just mentioned. Never, don't do anything without the approved permit. It might just cost you paying their transport. For some, they will even come, you know. Okay, so and I want to believe I will share with us what are necessary for this. It includes 4 copies of your architecture, 4 copies of your structure. You might have to do a task clearance, show an evidence of task clearance, you know. and sometimes they might need your identity and like that. So I have a list of it in my SOPs. You could get that, and it works across 360. We're still on foundation construction. So we've talked about setting out. Setting out is more like you transferring your building dimension from drawings to the ground using your pegs, your strings, and your theodolite. Errors here are built into every floor. And I must say this, that if it is possible, always request for the use of a theodolite, because it reduces your error to the barest minimum. These are indirect equipment, and they are indirect surveying equipment. But if your client, maybe it's a small project, your client couldn't afford it, then you could do a manual. Make sure that you are sure that you are comfortable and you are very good and competent in doing it manually, because error is inevitable. The square that you're using, you can't trust it. Even the fact that they use, these things are not perfect. Sometimes they are bent, and your strings, trusting on eyes alone are not always sufficient, but that's fine. Even last week I had to do one for a close relative in church, and that's what we do. But the best go for the indirect surveying instruments like your theodolite. So the next thing is to move to your foundation excavation after you've printed your building and using pegs and line right on the floor, on the ground. So your foundation excavation, excavate to depth specified the structural drawings. Never reduce depth to save cost. This is where building fail. So I'll say this again. Most times check, you see your vegetation, so it needs to be removed, as much as possible. So the best bet would be, if you are doing a pad foundation or a strip foundation, you always advise, particularly for a pad foundation, advise to take your footing to the depth of, should sit in the depth of 1.2 meters. That's safe. You've escaped, because that's a focus footing. The load is pointing in a small area, so it's easy for it to tint to one side, to fail, right? So follow that. I tell you, for building to fail is not an easy thing. It's because we miss processes. That's why once you do the right thing, it's almost impossible for your building to fail, right? So, but if you are doing a raft, you don't really need to excavate. If the ground is stable enough, is balanced, you don't need to just, understand. That is the whole idea of a raft, be like a spread foundation. It spreads the load across the area. If you are doing a pile, it's already a pile. Just you are going deep, is a deep foundation, right? So make sure that you dig based on the requirement, based on the specification in the structural drawing. Again, you look at your foundation, concrete, and reinforcement. So there are mixed ratios to these things. If you are doing a pile into the soil, there's possibility that your concrete might be exposed to things that you know nothing about, So the engineer can recommend, that's the specification for the structural engineer, with the date of the soil test, could recommend having a 1.5 3 mix ratio, or having a 1:4. But that's it. Or if it is a let's say a pad or even a raft that is not going to the soil, that is not exposed to the things in the soil, a 1.2 minimum, that's grade 20, could be used, while a minimum concrete cover of 40 mm to protect the exposure of your reinforcement, to the soil, which might lead to rusting, and you don't want to have that. So no pour should be done without sign off. And take note, it's always best to blind your area before carrying out your this thing. So your blind does not really need a serious mist ratio. So you could use a weak mist like a 136. It flies, right? So critical rules: no concrete is poured without the construction manager sign off on reinforcement placement. You should bet on professionals. So if anything goes wrong, you know who to hold responsible, right? But if you're using the right professionals, they want to do the right thing. They want to do at all time because they have more to lose. Especially those that are current certified, that are competent. They know the implication involved, the rules guiding the craft. If you mess up, you have yourself to blame. So the standard spec, we have our blinding concrete to 136, like I mentioned, structural members like your foundations, your columns, your beams, your slab. We have them to be minimum of grade 20, which is 124. But on special occasions, you could also have 1.53. So, and the mix like that. So the cover to a bar, we have minimum of 40 mm, and it must be high yield steel bars, right? So let's move. So we're on our phase 3, the superstructure construction. So I tell you, if you do all what I'm telling you, do it over time, document your own process, not just mine, you'll be shocked how far and how good and competent you'll become over the years. You understand? So column construction, you verify your bar size match column schedule, right? I will not believe that you can read drawing. Even if you can't read, you can ask anybody. It takes less than 30 minutes for you to be able to identify members, how to check members. It's not that difficult. Maybe you follow my channel, I will look for time to explain to you how to check. Right, so your column construction, you verify your bar size, match the column schedule, you check starter bar lap from foundation. If you are using a 16 mm, right, the formula is 45D. If you are using a 16 mm, automatically, your starter bar lap coming from the foundation should be 800. Right, should be 800. So you check your 45 times the diameter of the reinforcement. Check your 45 times 16 to give you around 800. So if it is 20 mm, the same thing, you check 45 times 20 mm. Check what is it going to give you. That's about 900, right? You see, these are little principles that you need to have, right? So you check. Those are how to prepare your checklist. So ensure your formwork is plumb and braced, right? Because if your reinforcements are properly done, well anchored, but your formwork is not plumb and braced, you have problem. If it's not plumb, it will look bent after it has been done, which work might need breaking or demolition. You understand? And if it's not properly braced, during pouring, concrete pouring, things can fail and your material will waste. You'll be losing concrete, money to concrete, and which is not cheap for your project, right? So it's not a success. So you also look at curing. So cube concrete, minimum 7 days before striking. Are you getting it? You cure your concrete minimum 7 days before striking. Although sometimes, because we are trying to meet up, we don't do these things, but it is best. You can get a jute bag, use it to wrap your column then you water it 2-3 times in a day for 7 days so that it can cure properly, can gain the recommended catalysis strength of concrete, right? Or you can even get nylon. Now you can control the temperature. So immediately after you strike, you use those nylon to cover. Now, but it's best to just leave your concrete and leave your column for 7 days before you remove the formwork. That's the standardized process. Like I said many times, because our project schedule, we don't keep to these rules, right? But there are alternative ways that you could also see how you can manage the temperature that can gain maximum strength. Like immediately you remove, wrap with a jute bag, start applying water 3 times a day. 3 times a day, assign somebody, let the stacks be to ensure that the jute bag is always wet, right? Or you get nylon, this cheap nylon, use it to wrap the columns. That will help. Yeah, so let's move to the beam. So the beam and slab construction, you confirm your formwork is popped and leveled. Like I said, you want to have a good sound reinforcement check and have a poor formwork, will not be good. That is even worse, because the buyers, the people buying, the people living, the people coming to patronize you, this business, they don't know anything about those reinforcement check. What they know, they want to see a building that is straight, they want to see a building that is well, appealing to the eyes. So that's why you need to take this serious, super serious. So if possible, use a white instrument like your dumping level. For people that just coming up, if you can't afford a dumping level, you should be able to afford maybe a laser. If you can't afford, you can go with, laser is more expensive. If you can't afford a laser or a dumping level, you get water level. Water level is just 500 naira per yard, and get maybe a 10 meter. Get people that can use it. If you are working and maybe you can't afford because site materials get lost, you can reach out. We could train your boys on how to use water level and when to use levels, so that to keep your project on track, right? You keep your project in line. These are done. Or maybe I'll try and see if I can make one of those videos, which is hard for me to do because I'll still prefer you go with indirect, right? So casting or MEP services before pour. Before you do your pouring, you might need to run your conduit pipes for your electrical cables, for your maybe your AC, your data cables, like your cameras, fire alarm, those pipes, those embedments, have them in place. Make sure they are checked and properly protected before you're pouring. Also look for a way to maintain the curing for a minimum of 21 days. So because you can't cover the top of your beam, so that jute back, so you need to get enough to cover and ensure that it's always wet for 21 days. These things are important, and it looks as if how long will I wait, but you must. For also, your formwork should not be removed till after 21 days. After minimum 21 days is best. Some of us want to do it 2 weeks. I tell you minimum 21 days, and as you do, you will see will contribute the strength of your work. So look at the block work and walling. So block minimum 28 days old before use. You try and get vendors, or if possible you can make block yourself, you make it. It's even best. That way you can be sure of the quality of your block. But if you can't, ensure that you get vendors that could supply you blocks that are 28 days or more. You understand? Old, not the one they make today and you are already using them the next day. So mortar, you look at 1:6 for internal, 1:4 for external. So these are what I use for your block setting, So if you are going for one bag, the way we have it in Nigeria, because we have 2 ekpan in one bag of cement, so you'll be looking at 12 buckets of sand or 12 ekpan of sand for a one bag of cement, right? So why, if it is internal, the external, because it's exposed to ambient condition, exposed to water, exposed to wind, exposed to the environment, you use 1:4. That's like a 8 bag or 8 ekpan of sand for a 1 bag of cement. So also you ensure proper bonding, no continuous vertical joint. So we have different type of bond. The best that are recommended are Flemish bond. You must not have a straight line of joint for your block. Even if you are having on those small design area that is less than maybe 450, and the block size is 450 already, the block length is 450 already, what you should do is cut it. Don't have it straight. It's very dangerous for your construction. So install lintel over all opening per drawing. So I always say lintel part and one way you could save money. There is no need running lintel except you're having a very big windows, so 1.8 2 meters, in all parts of a building, but there's no need and they are close. You can just have precast lintel. Understand? The goal is to be able to carry the block coming on top of it, not for you to not to carry the whole building or brace the whole building. That's the work of the beam, right? So we'll be moving into phase 4, which is finishing stage. So transforming the structural shell into a livable building. So our roof construction falls into this stage. We are looking at when you are having your aluminum roofing sheet, always recommend nothing less than 0.55. If you want to go for 0.45, I tell you, it's best to go nothing less. And in Nigeria, our material thickness are poor already, so go for 0.55, because 0.55 you have 10 years ago is now your 0.45. So is now your 0.7. So before it was thicker, now it is lighter. So I encourage you, go for minimum of 0.55. That's the standard, and it's profitable for you, so that you don't have your roofing leaking because a little small maintenance that you do. Probably you climb on the roof to do something and you already have leakage. Somebody even play ball, you have leakage. Your solar installation, you have leakage. So you need to consider these things. It's cheaper to do than maintaining, right? So all roof members treated against termite. So all your wood, because you'll be using wood, what you should do, get anti-termite insecticide chemicals, use it to treat your wood. I don't want to promote any product, but there are enormous numbers of chemicals out there that you could get. Use it to treat it first. You can just spray it, treat it, leave it before. It's best to treat them on ground. Don't let your carpenters deceive you that let's have it up there first, we'll treat it up. No, it's not always comfortable to do, and Yeah. So install your drainage gutter per drawings. So if this where you are having maybe a parapet slab or hidden roof, there might be need, depending on the design, to have a drainage gutter. So do it, you understand, as per the drawing. So also follow approved roof structural plan strictly. There are some roof that are more like that are more even complex than a slab and beam system. So follow the approved structural plan. I tell you, you get it well. And we'll move to our plastering because finishing stage. Plastering, screeding and tiling. So the external plaster, the same thing. We use our 1:4 for your cement and sand. And then minimum thickness with 15 mm. I always encourage, get the best of workers for this, because this shows the beauty of your building and how the work was properly done. Then another thing you should do is ensure that you collect gauge. Ensure that you collect gauge for these things. Yeah, so don't just start plastering, throwing. No, first thing first, take your gauge. It's not like you setting out, vertically. Take your gauge first. So the same thing, your internal plastering, your minimum of 1:6, right? For your sand and cement ratio, already explained that, how it is. Our ours come in one bag, which is 2, so just multiply by 2, right? So multiply by 2 for the sand and the cement. So you use 12 sand for one bag for the internal, while 8 sand for one bag for the external. So while the floor screeding, right? The floor screeding, the standard recommendation based on code is 1:3, but it might not be economical for you. So look at what you have, and depending on the thickness of the sand screed, the floor screed, right? So we always say minimum of 50 mm, because definitely you will have some electrical pipe running to, and so that to cover up for some of your levels. When you have 50 mm in one area, the other side will be giving you 30 mm, because there might be possibility of fluctuation in your leveling. So your tile must be in a perfect plumb. So that's what you use to balance, right? Except if you are sure, so you don't run into breaks. So your screed cure, 7 days minimum before tiling. So the best recommendation will always be that screed first before you tile. But many people, because they want to save time, they want to make the money fast, most of the tiler, they want to screed and lay immediately. They'll just screed, it has not dried, they'll sprinkle cement on it and place it. It's not the best way of working. The best way will be that screed first, then you come back and do. And the recommendation is actually 7 days, that you believe that it would have dried and cured properly, gained the maximum strength before doing that. So always get the best of team and make it composite to them that no, we are not screeding and laying. It's not the best. I don't recommended practice. So MEP installation, or MEP installation is your mechanical and electrical and plumbing. This could include your ACs, depending on the type of ACs, or your electrical works. So also your plumbing works, right? We can also go further and add it to it. Under your electrical, we'll have your high voltage and also your low voltage. Your high voltage is your power, you understand, power source mainly, while your low voltage can include your CCTV, your data, your internet, your telecom, your DSTV, so like that. So test all plumbing under pressure before concealing. Before you even do your plastering, it's always advisable that you test all your supply pipe from your plumbing to be sure, so that not after you've plastered, you've tiled, and now you discover leakages and you start breaking again. So ensure proper earthing and bonding. Get the best of electrical engineers. They will recommend how the building should be earthed to avoid issues. Yeah. So install appropriate distribution board capacity. So depending on the usage, we determine the distribution board that you'll be using. If you just lightings, not too much, so it will determine whether it is a D4, a D8, a D6, and so on and so forth. So that's why you need a license, not just a license, a competent electrical engineer to guide you on that. Now we are moving into the completion. You could see that this same process, once you've done your foundation, same process for the first floor, you repeat it on the second floor, you repeat it. So it's the same process. Right. Hopefully in the future I might have come up with a spreadsheet showing your project management plan, breaking all these things step by step. Understand? But once you understand all this, go through this material or get the SOPs even by yourself in your own language, you can also craft your own process, because that's a beautiful thing. Do it enough, document your process, record your lessons learned, and over time, you find your expression. That is what it is. Find your expression in vendor management, find your expression in all these processes. Right, so this is the phase 5, completion and handover. So one thing we do is snagging and inspection. In fact, if I have the opportunity to be on a construction site, one thing I do like every week is snagging. It helps my planning. I don't just wait till the end, but there's a formal snagging where we come, snag, check your structural integrity, no cracks or settlement, all doors and windows operate correctly, all electrical point live and labeled, all plumbing fixture leak free, all finishing meet specification, external drainage and compound complete. So these are a job of whether I need to have consultant, but even at that, depending on the size of the project, these are things you could do. Check these things. So nothing is accepted below standard. So certification of completion. The certification of completion is legally required for change of use application, mortgage and bank financing, property insurance, sale and title transfer. That's what user certification is for. Supervision tools include in the SOPs. I said on seller, you could see a document of this so that you can have it, study it till you can make your own. Even if you don't want to, you can use it the way it is and print. So we have our presentation document for every stage of construction, your fish checklist, so the detailed quality control checklist for every one of the 5 phases. Nothing is missed on site. These are things you should have. A site daily guide, a daily site log. So you complete 1 log per day, or you get your workers. It's not hard to. You complete 1 log per day, workers, materials delivered, work done, instruction given, safety check. Can tell you, okay, the workers that are on site, the materials delivered on that day, the work that was done, the instruction given, the safety check. You could see that as a developer or a building owner, once you have your site daily log being done, it already serves as a report for you. It's easy for you to track the activities of the day, right? Imagine you have a system where it is filled on site and it is digitized, maybe snapped and recorded on cloud, so that on a day 1 you have, on a day 2 you have, on a day 3 you have. So you don't just run on your work just with the mind. So supervision sign off. You have engineer and contractors sign off at every critical stage. Create accountability and legal protection. Before concrete is poured, your engineer comes to give approval and he signs. So if there's anything, it's easy for you to have a claim. So this create accountability and legal protection. And because a lot, is a lot of investment and safety is involved. So it must be legally protected. So issue tracker. Lastly, so you capture, you assign and deadline every site issue, right? So problems are resolved before they become defect. So that's this SOP helps a lot. Issue tracking, right? So build it right, build it once. Are you building in Nigeria? I work with property owners, developers, and investors across Nigeria to deliver residential construction projects, structurally sound, compliant, and on budget. So what I used to say, we help you save money. We help you save money. I will keep your building safe. You understand? So we have the best thing you could think of, and we are reachable. We do both small and big, and to us no project is small, right? No project is a small project. The same rules applies, the same structural integrity is needed, and you need a process for that. Thank you very much. I remain Joshua, your construction expert. God bless you.